Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Higher Ground podcast. With me today is my friend and former manager, Jeremy Sussman. Jeremy and I work together at a company that does a variety of different software services, things like search and advertising, and it's Google. But we were focused on building governance, risk, and compliance systems. But I prefer to have Jeremy introduce yourself and to describe your background and introduce yourself to our guests.
It's my background in a nutshell, huh? So I've been at the aforementioned Google for just under 17 years. Prior to that, I actually worked at IBM for 10 years. I was talking to someone the other day and they told me they were in a company for over 25 years. And I was like, that's forever. And then my wife was like, yeah, if you add IBM and Google, you've been doing this forever. Before that, I was in grad school. And before that, I worked for a chemical company and a bank. I've been kind of all over the place. But I've been a computer software programmer / I've been in this industry since I was in high school, actually, my first job.
Wow.
Back in the 80s. We can maybe talk about that. And I'm getting old enough that I'm really considering retiring sometime soon. So I don't know if I'll talk about that.
That's amazing. Now, the fact that we're able to start thinking about such things is a strange place to be in, but also exciting. You start thinking about what's phase 2 going to look like. What am I going to do next? Absolutely. So that's it. That is exciting. We can cover that in a little bit, but I want to start off by introducing you to our guests through some I'm going to say for most people, they're not controversial, but I suspect with you, there's going to be a little more spice in these questions. And I'm just going to go right into it. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
So this or that, yellow cab or Uber?
Wow. I don't usually do either because I live in New York City and I do not like getting in cars, but I actually do Lyft. And my first choice is Waymo. My second choice is Lyft. And then my third would probably be Uber.
Okay. Interesting. I was figuring you'd go for the yellow cab because it's the New York experience, the true New Yorker thing.
As a true New Yorker, you never get in a cab, man. Those are for the tourists.
So it's this yellow cab I'm in. It's called the subway.
The subway? It's the subway, your hush puppies, and then maybe a cab, right?
Hush puppies. For our listeners in the South, those are not those delicious little cornbread things. They're very different. Very different. Yeah. Okay, fine. Good answer. Like I said, all answers are good, but some are better than others. How about this one? This one may or may not be controversial again, but pizza or bagels?
The two. I will say that a good slice of pizza is better than a great bagel, but a bad piece of pizza is much worse than a bad bagel.
Ooh, I love that. That is
but
amazing.
They're totally different. That's like, it's not even apples and oranges. That's like apples and cats or something. They're totally different. Totally different.
Not even the same
and
kingdom.
By the way, you only get the good ones in New York of both of those. So that's where they're similar.
I mean, come on. This is why we go here for near the very beginning of the podcast. Anyone who stops listening after this, I understand where you're from.
And you're wrong.
And you're wrong. Oh, did I mention that? We're today, welcome to the extra judgy episode.
Were you expecting last time you've known we were fine?
Not in the least, my friend. Not in the least. Excellent. So are you more of a cooking in person or going out to eat?
Again, for all your questions, I'm like both. I cook a lot. I'm the cook in the family. My kids are older now. My son's 27, my daughter's 24, but their entire lives when they were here, I cooked at least 5 dinners every week, sometimes 6, and literally me every night. But I love a good restaurant. I'm definitely not above going out. On balance, cooking in, but can't say anything wrong about it.
Won't say no to going out. Okay, fair enough. All right, this one you can't be both. So morning person or night owl? So Come on. I
don't sleep much. Definitely, when I was a kid, I was much more of a night owl and I would work until very, very late. Having kids forced me to get up before the crack of dawn. And so I get up at like 5:30, 5 o'clock every day. So I guess I'm probably more, but mostly just I don't sleep.
Okay. We're learning, but we're not getting any definitive answers. Yeah, it's okay. That's fine. I'm going to try another one that's generally binary for people, but we'll see. Do you believe in free will or destiny?
Ooh, free will. I definitely don't believe in destiny.
Okay.
This is one of those things. I heard a great expression the other day. I'm trying to see if I can recreate it. I don't believe anything that I can't prove, but I don't disbelieve anything I can't disprove. So I love this thing, right? So if it's like anything that is scientifically provable, if you can't prove it, then I don't believe in it. But things like, extrasensory perception and stuff like that, where it's like, the more woo-woo stuff, I don't disbelieve that stuff. I just don't believe it. But I'm not saying it's wrong. I love that. Anything, I only believe if you can prove it, I only believe it's proven. If you can't prove it, I can't disbelieve it because you can't disprove it.
Yeah, that's good.
I
No,
hold
all
that
right.
strong.
As always, I leave, or enter this conversation at least with food for thought. So thank you for that. Excellent. Here's my cheesy transition
By
question.
the way, that
So,
was Adam Grant who said that, just to make sure we give credit where it is due on a
yeah,
podcast.
very good. If next time I see him, I'll let him know. This one's not really fair. In-person interview or phone/GVC.
Oh my God, cannot compare. Being in person is everything. I do not like VCs. I really hate the phone. To the point where I piss people off the way that I'm just like, I can't pay attention on the phone. My wife gets mad at me because she'll call me for a good reason. I'll answer. And then she's like, why are you like this? I'm like, because I'm on the phone. I don't like being on the phone. I'm really bad on the phone.
Why are you like this?
Seriously.
If I had $1 every time somebody asked me that question, I have a lot of dollars. Why are you like that? I don't know.
If I had $1 every time I asked you that time, I'd have a lot of money.
You know what? Also true. Very, very true. I love it. I love it. Tell me about your decision to become a product manager. Like Jeremy really was the one who took a bet on me in product management. And, I've been doing this for many years, but without the title, without the officialness. So I appreciate you supporting me, sponsoring me, coaching me through the process and all. But
of course,
I'm very curious what prompted you to, take this particular path.
So it's actually a great story. I did not choose product management. Product management chose me.
No.
I don't think I ever told you the story, Tom. So
I don't believe so.
As I said, I was at IBM for 10 years. And one day I get an email from a buddy of mine from grad school who was already at Google asking me if I would be interested in joining the company. And I'm like, I wasn't happy at IBM. It had gotten extremely bureaucratic. It always was. And so I was like, sure. So I interviewed for a software engineering position because I was a software engineer. I'd gotten a PhD and I was a researcher at IBM, but I was doing applied research. It was mostly, I was coding, right? So I come into the interview, and the way the interview worked back then, you would write code on a whiteboard. And who writes code on a whiteboard? And I failed the interview, and I knew I'd failed the interview. And I said to the recruiter, a guy named Jim, a great guy, as I walked out, I said to Jim, I'm like, Jim, I failed the interview. He's like, everybody thinks they failed the interview. I'm sure you did fine. I'm like, no. Kevin is going to fail me. He's like, telling you, man, everyone says that to me as I walk out. Well, I get a call the next day from Jim. He's like, yeah, you were right. You failed. And Kevin was the one who failed you because I didn't answer Kevin's question. And by the way, I ended up working with Kevin, and I adore the guy, but he had a very thick, I believe, Turkish accent, if I remember right. And so I couldn't fully understand his questions. And the question had something to do with moving chess pieces on a phone keyboard, and I never got the answer he was looking for. Like I kept answering a question, but it was never the one who was asking. So I knew, the 45 minutes were up, and I never had given him the algorithm. So I knew I failed. Like he had to fail me. But anyway, so Jim says to me, but every single person who interviewed you thought you'd make a good product manager. Would you be interested? I did not know at the time that was an insult coming from software engineers, but I thought it might be just, But anyway, so I was like, of course, I had no idea what that meant. I was like, of course I want to be a product manager. Who doesn't want to be a product manager?
Why wouldn't I? That sounds amazing.
Really having no idea what, and then when I say no idea what it means, product manager at IBM, extremely different than product manager at Google. Product manager at IBM is basically part of the sales team. So when I say I didn't know what it meant, I didn't know what it meant to be a product manager at Google. So,
So a product manager at IBM is part of so they represent the product to the client saying.
Correct.
I see. Yes. So I'm a specialist in DB2. I'm a specialist in blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. And I was actually very good friends with a product manager at IBM. And what I do is, I remember talking to him after I took the job. I'm like, what I do is nothing like what you do. Anyway, so they're like, come back in a couple of weeks. So, okay, I'll come back in a couple of weeks. So now I come back and I'm doing the PM interview this time. And I literally, I did not, I know you talk a lot, I'm sure in this podcast about what books to read and how to study and how to prep. I didn't have time to do that. I wouldn't have anyway, because that's not who I am. But I had no time anyway. So I walk in this interview and, they're asking me questions and I'm answering them. And I'll never forget, there's one guy, I won't use his name, I do know who it was. He starts asking me questions. And like 20 minutes in, he starts laughing. And I'm pissed because I failed the first set of, I'm going into this assuming I'm not good enough for Google, contrary to my huge ego. He's laughing at me in the middle of an interview. And I'm like, dude, why are you laughing?
Yeah.
I'm mad. He's like, no, you're reacting wrong. My team has just spent 6 months trying to figure out the answer to the question I just asked you. And you gave the answer we came up with in 10 minutes.
Boom.
I was like, I guess I'm good at this.
Right. Who knew? That's amazing.
I did well in the interview. And first day, and I've lived I don't know what the job is. And I like to say I've spent 17 years trying to figure it out. I'm still not done.
Well, it moves. I think the target moves. At least that part. That's been my experience.
And I do think it's different at different companies. And from my experience from talking to friends of mine who do it in other places, and people have left Google and gone to other companies. And I do think there's a range. There's
Sure.
definitely a huge range. All jobs have ranges,
Sure.
but I feel like product management is a pretty large range. And I would say it's like from the MBA side to the engineering side. And obviously, I'm over here because I was an engineer for 25 years before doing that.
Yeah. I know at Microsoft, the title, at least for my limited, when you describe the product manager role, it's more of what we call program manager. You're
Right.
basically building a thing, but it's
Right.
the orchestration, the scheduling, the coordination of resources, the budget, a lot
That's
of
right.
those bits, of which we do probably 20% versus the actual, the engineering. Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah.
I think I never told that story before, but yes.
No, I don't remember.
my
I would
origin
remember that. That's a gem. That is definitely a gem. So, on the topic of interviewing, what would you say was your worst interview experience? We've all got them, so feel free to pick from.
Yeah. So it's actually funny when my kids were, so as I said, my kids are in their 20s now, but since I've been here for 17 years, when I started, they were 10 and 7. And I used to come home and tell them, they loved interview stories. So if I did interviews, my kids would be like, tell me about the interview, because they loved,
Yeah.
because there were some clunkers. So I would say one of my favorite questions was an analytical question where I would ask the person to estimate how many person miles, people times distance, are traveled on the subway system in New York. I'm based in New York, so I could ask this question in Manhattan on a given day. And the point of this is it's not meant to take up the full 45 minutes. It's supposed to be like I want you to answer me in 5 to 10 minutes, because estimate means don't multiply 7 by 13, multiply 5s and 2s, right? Be smart about the choice of numbers you make. Be smart, and you don't have to get it right. Just be order of magnitude right and get through it quickly. It's an estimate. The whole point of this is to show me that as a PM, you'll be able to very quickly give numbers within order of magnitude or 2 of the answers. We can do something with. Right?
Yeah.
But I had this one,
and also your logic, right? Show your logic.
100%, and your logic.
Yeah.
Logic's more important, right? Get the logic right and do it quickly. So I had this one person started by saying, now facts aren't that important, but please, started by saying, I believe there's roughly 100 million people in the United States, and there are 50 states. So that means there's 2 million per state. And I'm going to guess like a quarter of those probably live in the city of New York compared to the whole state. So I'm saying there's probably 1,000 people in New York City. And I'm like, whoa, first of all, not all states are equal. I don't have to explain to you the number of really dumb things that were just said. And then proceeded in that vein. And then after doing all this dumb math, gave me an answer to the original question that wasn't related to all the math they had done. So following their math, they ended up with like 20,000. And they're like, yeah, but that sounds wrong. So I'm going to say, I don't know, 400,000. And so it was like 15 to 20 minutes of like thinking, not really thinking. And then they just pulled a number out of their tuchus. I don't know how much you want me to swear.
Yeah, it's whatever. Yeah, we're good
So
here.
I came home and told my kids about this. Oh my God, did they laugh forever about that one. They still today bring it up. And there were a number like that where people, I think that the ones that were always like, I got annoyed at the people. That's only one kind of question I would ask. I got annoyed at the people who would over again, use 7s and 13s and, come up with numbers that weren't that important and then spend 7 minutes multiplying numbers by hand. And I'm like, why are you doing this? It's an estimate, or they would act like the number that they came up with, because it's all on top of your head. We're like provably right. It's like, you don't need them to be. This is an estimate.
No,
Remember,
it's estimate.
you're estimating. Yeah. But an answer like that just was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
That's
pretty epic. I'm now 15 minutes into the interview. I'm like, I just need to bide my time so I can get out of here and move on, because this person's.
Well, all right. So that's something. Again, I know companies are different, and every company has different philosophies towards the experience. You don't want to give an interview candidate a bad experience. Completely understand that. But when the person's not a fit, and you just know that they aren't, I don't want to say not at the bar necessarily, but they're in a position where it's not going to work. Do you find it kinder to say, it's not working, thank you for coming in, and end it, or go to the soft exit, which to me, the soft exit is, you got a 45-minute scheduled. If you're at minute 10, you're like, okay, so do you have any other questions for me? That's a good indicator that there's no moving forward. I am familiar with our practices. Want to make sure everyone has the experience. You want to help them as much as you can without giving them answers, things like that. But there's a point where the candidate's not going to make it.
So one thing I will say, my average interview consisted of 3 parts. And so like I just gave the example of the analytical one, and that I might cut off after 10 minutes. And I might in my head be like, this guy's done, but this person's done. But if I am, I'm like, let me ask the product question, because maybe it's possible they'll like knock that one side of the far out of the park. Nice. I'll go back, right? Maybe. I don't know that it ever happened. I definitely had people on the second question do better, But I
That
don't
makes
think
a lot
I've
of
had
sense.
someone where I was like at the point where I'm like, this is done, and they compensated enough. But I felt that
Okay.
that was at least like, give them the second chance, give them the third chance. Don't
Sure.
cut, like after 10 minutes, I'm not dismissing you. I'm not. I'm
Okay.
going to still
That's
go
good.
through a full panel. But I did have cases where the panel, which usually some interviews I didn't even get to question 3 or, halfway through question 2. If I was done with the panel of 3 questions and it was like, 25 minutes in, I'm like, okay, I know I'm not gonna do this. I would definitely go to the, do you have any questions for me?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a test of that, they should have questions. And if they were
Yeah,
like,
so you
nope,
should.
then I'm like, okay, then I guess we're done here. But usually I would try to fill in at least a full 40 minutes. And usually that wasn't hard. Obviously from this, I talk a lot. I will say though, Tom, the other half of your question, which is like, do I do people a favor and kind of let them know how the interview went? I never do. I would often have people at the end of interviews ask me, can you give me feedback on my interview? And I actually I don't think that's one, I don't think it's really my job,
Sure.
but also I don't know if that's fair because if they did really well, they're going to find out when we offer them a position.
Mm-hmm.
If they did something wrong, I find interviewing so hard, and you're being put in a position of being a judge that I don't want to tell the person what I think they did wrong because this is just me.
Yeah.
I could have just had a bad day or we just didn't have the right vibe. I don't know, something about that. It's
icky.
It feels like I'm giving myself too much power. I know they're asking for that, but I was never comfortable with it. So I really, I don't, in fact, and I tell when I mentor people, when I coach people, I tell them, please don't ever ask that at the end of the interview. I think it's a bad question. I really do. My job as an interviewer is not to give you feedback on the interview. My job as an interviewer to determine if you're capable of doing the job or not. I don't like that meta-analysis in situ of the interview. Just my personal taste.
I like the way you framed it in the sense of it's my opinion, and my opinion is not the final decision. And whether I think you did good or bad is not. It's an input into a decision. It's not the decision. So I don't want to get your hopes up or knock them down.
Right.
I'm giving you my 2 cents.
And you, Tom, you might have done the exact same interview I did, and you'd be like, this person's great. And so it's way too much.
I like that.
It's a shame it's a shame how much power you have as an interviewer. Let's not double that up by making you think I actually know what I'm talking about.
Way to end on a high note there. Thank you for that. I like it. No, I understand. Yeah, I would say that's it's an interesting question because a lot of times other interviewers I spoke with at different companies, I think I see at smaller companies, they want that sort of hungriness. How did I do, without sounding needy, because if you sound needy, there's ways of it. But I understand. I take your point, especially when you're dealing with such a large organization that's so structured. That's you're going to end up talking to at least 5 people. When you add everything together, you don't want to necessarily over-index. No, that's fair.
No, as with everything we're talking about, this is just my opinion.
Well, and there's a lot of them out there, and what the objective is to give people guidance and counsel. And I think the way you ask do you have any questions for me? The follow-ups to that tell you so much about the candidate. Because you're coming in with your stock questions, right? And you've got to do the panel. And if you're doing the cultural fit, if you're doing the technical, the product, whatever the specifics, what they ask you, especially if there's enough time to really get into that, is incredibly telling about how much they've prepared, about how they're thinking about the job, about how they're imagining themselves figuring out, the math of the subway. So I always enjoy those questions. The only wrong answer there is, no, I don't have any questions for you.
Yeah. I will say though, Tom, and this might be a little bit controversial, I never ever judge people on what questions they have for me. And I agree with you. If they say no, that's weird. But I know there are people who expect the questions you have for me to be smart, and I don't hold them to that. What I do let happen from that point is when they ask me a question, we have a little bit of a conversation based on I will judge the conversation, as one always does whenever anyone's having conversations. Sure. If their questions are all questions, I'm like, I don't think they're very interesting questions. I don't care. That's fine. Because I was interviewing you. It's fine. Oftentimes those questions will, a good question by them will add to the conversation, and therefore they'll be putting, it's like extra credit. They'll be putting points on the board in overtime.
I see.
Right?
I like that. No, I like that. And okay. No, that's fair. Cause I like to think that they're what I generally am looking for is they're imagining themselves in the role. So they're asking questions about the role. How would I fit? Imagine me doing this.
Right. They ask culture questions. So again, if they ask culture questions, I love culture questions. As you know, Tom, I'm a culture warrior.
Yes.
I love culture. I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't ask those questions.
Sure.
But if you do, we're probably going to have a conversation that I'm going to find really intriguing. And again, you might get some extra points on the board by having that conversation. So I think culture questions are really smart. To your point, if I was actually taking this role, what would I care about? Me personally, I'd care a lot about culture. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about the culture.
Sure.
Or, but when it's questions like, what's your average day at work? I'm like, you're a product manager. You don't have average days at work. So why are you asking me that?
That's a good answer, right? So have you ever had 2 days in a row that are the same?
Right.
No. Well, Saturday
Yeah,
and Sunday.
when I'm on
Yeah.
vacation.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. Nice. Okay, awesome. What are the characteristics you like in a manager that you like to see? Your
Yeah.
leadership over the years, you've been doing this for a while in multiple
Yeah.
companies. What are the things you look for in a manager, or if you want to talk maybe about a team or an organization, what are those things that would be, this is a company I want to work for and they've got this thing and this is what.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We don't have enough time in the day to talk about this. I'm trying to figure out what's the one thing I want to pull. I love the study of management. I mentioned earlier, I quoted
Yes.
Adam Grant. I'm listening to a podcast right now where Brene Brown and Adam Grant are just talking to each other. And it's like so fascinating because they just pull these little, it's like a conversation in the middle of this gem pops out. And I'm like, wait, I need that written down.
Write that down. Save, bookmark. Yeah.
So one of those little like gems that I heard a long, long time ago that I just always think about as a manager is, be the manager that you wish you had is definitely something I try to do. But so then what does that mean? What is a manager I want to have? My biggest goals as a manager, first of all, starts from trust. I really need the people who report to me to trust me. And I go to extreme lengths to establish trust. I tend to be very transparent. I try to be very open. I try to make sure that the people understand that. And what does it mean to trust me? It means, I'm going to try to do, like, this is a business. Business comes first. I'm going to try to do everything I can to keep your best interest in mind. I'm not going to do anything that's going to hurt you intentionally. I'm going to try to provide you with what you need to be successful, which often means I'm just going to tell you the truth. I'm going to give you information that maybe you aren't supposed to have, but I'm going to trust you, make sure that, like, what is, you're going to shut your mouth if I tell you can't, I'm going to tell you things that you can't repeat. I do that. I definitely share things that I'm not supposed to share because I trust you. That's my trust of you. Your trust of me is, again, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to screw you. And then our interests will align so that, it's not, if you do your job really well, that should compound for me and means I'm doing my job very well. And that leads to, again, to me, like, I need to give you what you need to succeed. You need to be able to ask me for what you need to know, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of this alignment. But when it comes to me, one of the biggest things about trust, and maybe this is a little different than trust, maybe it's more empathy. I really make sure that the people who report to me know that I care about them as humans. And I do, honestly do. And I've had numerous times where I've made decisions that weren't necessarily what Google would want me to do because I care about the person. So I'll give you a real quick example. One of my jobs, not the one that you and I shared before that. My first day on the job, my boss says to me, this guy, Jeff, is about to quit. I need you to go convince him to stay. So I go in a room with Jeff and I say, I hear you're considering leaving. And I will tell you that, my boss said my job was to convince you to stay. But I'm not going to do that, Jeff, because look, this is the first time we're meeting. You don't know me from Adam. The last thing I want to do is to convince you to stay, and then you regret it, and you grow bitter, and you hate me because I talked you into something you didn't want to do. So why don't you tell me about the position you're thinking about getting, and I'll give you my honest advice. I'm going to take off my Google hat, I'm going to take off my manager hat, and I'm just going to be here for you to listen. And he went through telling me about this new offer he was getting from another company. And I said to him, look, man, if I were you, I would take that job. I'm not going to get you to say, but I'm going to give you 3 questions that I want you to ask them. And if the answers to these 3 questions are good, take the job. And if any of them are bad, come back to me and we'll talk again. And he came back to us on a Friday. He came back to me on Monday. He's like, I asked him the 3 questions. Here's the 3 answers I got. And then he told me 3 answers and we were laughing. I'm like, have fun at your new job because great answers. But I tell a story because it's like, honestly, these are human beings who have lives. And the last thing I want to be is that schmuck who screwed up their life because it made me better as a manager, made me look good with my manager, made Google happy. That's not, I don't play that game, man. And because that's the approach I take, I do think that leads again to more trust.
Yeah. And you're still friends with this person today, I bet, right? I don't doubt, or it, that is, those are the bridges you build, and that's they will come to you and say, ask you for advice. They may refer people to you. Look, this person wants to come to work for you that you're working at now, or your next company, your next, whatever, like wherever you are. That level of trust is not something you easily forget. And I'm with you. I've had similar conversations with folks where we would brainstorm around, should I stay, should I go? Now, obviously, if this is a good person, selfishly, especially for small companies, you want them to stay because leaving is going to cause pain. But on the other hand, they are a person that you like and respect. And if you like them enough, you want to keep them. You would think you'd like them enough to want them to be successful in their life. So
I hope so.
I hope so. Yeah.
A good friend doesn't put themselves before you. They help you.
I Can't agree
And then
more.
there's a whole bunch of other secondary things, like as you mentioned, being set up for success, making a job less ambiguous. All there's all the like straightforward stuff you try to do as a manager as
Wait,
well.
did you just say make your job less ambiguous? And you're saying this is somebody who worked for you? When did that actually happen?
I said try, Tom.
You did say try. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I will say truer words were never spoken to me. I don't remember who said it on the job interview when I was interviewing at Google. I might have been Christy, when thriving in ambiguity or living in ambiguity or embracing ambiguity is something about this is part of what we are. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I understand what those words mean. I understand it, but it's kind of like I want to find a positive way to say what I'm about to say, but I can't. It's like, have you ever had chicken pox? Yeah, it's the concept of being itchy, but man, you don't know until you had it.
So yeah, I mean the expression is thriving.
Terrible example, but you know what I'm going
I know.
with.
The expression Google uses is thriving in ambiguity. And I often think, to work at Google, you do need to be able to thrive in ambiguity. That doesn't mean you got to pile more ambiguity on top of it.
Correct.
Right? Like,
yes.
That doesn't mean ambiguity is a good thing. It doesn't make us thrive. We thrive despite ambiguity. So maybe a little less.
Correct. No, and I see as my job, especially the more you move up the ladder in terms of responsibility and level and management and all of that, your job should be to remove, like you said, shape, cut out, minimize the ambiguity, or at least point the person in a direction to say, here's the 3 things that we don't know, go figure them out. Because at least that way you're shaping it in a way.
It's hard though. It's hard.
It is. It's really tough. Yeah. I don't think I ever understood all the variables when you consider a company that has such a tremendous volume of data, such a tremendous user base. The smallest change could have material impact for zillions of people. It's exciting.
About Google is we mentioned culture earlier. Companies do have cultures. I really do believe that, and they have personalities. And Google, I've been at Google long enough. So everybody who joined Google, when the first thing they heard when they joined Google was, "Oh, you don't know what it was like in the old days when it was great," right? So I joined in 2010. That's what I heard, and now I get to say that to other people. But the true Google culture that I saw, in 2010, and for the first, and it did slowly change over time, was one of, Google was printing money, so we could do whatever the hell we want. It was always one, we expect people to come up with ideas. We expect people to follow through those ideas. You worked a lot more than 40 hours because you were so excited and energized to do things. You were so energized and enthused about an idea, about a possibility, that you could just run with things. So it truly is and was a very bottom-up culture. And a bottom-up culture is always going to have ambiguity because you don't have, as opposed to IBM, which is very top-down culture, you don't have anyone telling you what to do. So of course it's ambiguous because that's baked into the very core of Google's
fiber of the organization. We talked about good manager. We expect out of good managers. What are some lessons? I know I personally have learned quite a few lessons in my life from the quote unquote not so good managers. No. Certainly not. You're one of the best managers I ever worked for. I'm saying the people who I learned from, like, oh my gosh, I will never do that.
Yeah.
What are some lessons or some experiences that you might want to share that have been in the don't do camp? And again, not naming names, or maybe if you want to go back to your IBM days, that's fine.
Yeah. So, one is, it's kind of the opposite of like being more about yourself than being helpful, where you see someone who's like, they're not thinking about how to make you successful. They're thinking about how they can use you. They think of you as a cog. They think of you as a position. And, look, in a business world, I am a cog. You're paying me to do the thing you want me to do. But when it's, when it seems like counter to what I think is the right thing to do, I need a sense of integrity. I need a sense, but I think the managers with which I've had the most problem are the ones who don't. I'm trying to think of how I could say this. They don't really see who you are. They don't see what your strengths are. They don't see their weaknesses are. They kind of make up their mind about who you are, and you can't break out of that box, right? So, look, I know I have some flaws. I've quite a, I can give you the long list and the short list.
I can actually.
I also believe I have some. You already have the list. I also like to think I have a few strengths. Playing to my strengths and helping me overcome my weaknesses. That's what a good manager does. So a bad manager does the opposite, right? Where they kind of decided because of this flaw, you can never be successful, or I can't use someone like you. Everybody, I literally believe this. Everybody can be useful. Now, the skills that someone has, you might not have a job at the moment that needs those skills, and therefore you do need to get rid of them. Or if they're not trying, the reason to get rid of people because they're just not, they're mailing it in, they're et cetera, et cetera. But to me, the most common reason that I've had to get rid of people, I've had to get rid of people in my life, is just because their skill set didn't match any position I had that could use that skill set.
Right.
And that was unfortunate. In that case, it was better to, manage them out than to keep them.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone has made up their mind, has labeled you as X, and then assumes you can only do X, and therefore kind of doesn't allow you to do the work you can and could learn to do, doesn't allow you to grow, doesn't allow you to. That's the worst experience I had, is where I've been labeled as something that I know I'm not, and I've proved in other situations I'm not, and yet that manager refused to understand that was possible. Right? Yeah. I recently had someone who literally told me I was a bad manager. And they're like, we want you to be an IC, Googleese for, individual contributor, someone who doesn't manage. They wanted me to be an IC. And I was like, okay, I can be an IC. I've been an IC before, but why? And they said, oh, because we've heard we've decided you're not a good manager. And I'm like, well, how did you decide that? Because I can give you a list of people, including what I'm talking right now, who actually think I'm a good manager. And they're not just saying this because they're blowing smoke on my ass. These are people who I used to manage, or I know I'm not a perfect manager. I know I don't manage everybody well, but on balance, I do know how to manage. And so someone telling me we've decided you're not a good manager was just like, based on what? Why? So it's all about this, like, not seeing you. I again go back to what I think I like, as what I ascribe to as manager, is seeing you for who you are. The worst managers I've had did not see me for who I am.
I see. And it sounds to me like either they were operating on a preconceived notion, or they've come to a conclusion and didn't give you the opportunity to, I don't want to say defend, but refute or validate this assumption, right? Because usually it comes from an assumption that should be tested.
Yeah,
right?
and Tom, you're picking on something I think is really important. Again, my management style, my modus operandi. I will talk through anything. And I will give people as much time as they need, obviously within reason, but often more than most people would. I fundamentally, as I said, I think everyone has skills, and you and I have gone through this. Like, if we talk through something, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's really hard. And I find if I spend the time with you to try to explain my mental model and try to understand yours, because odds are we're talking past each other, that is actually some of the most valuable conversations I've had.
That's right.
Is where, because we both probably have a truth, and discovering your truth and explaining mine to you. First of all, explaining mine to you makes me become more eloquent and more like, it sharpens it. I've got to figure it out. Because if you're not getting it, I got to figure out how to transmit it to you. Yep. And those conversations are the most valuable. So a manager who won't do it, because to your point about, like, doesn't give you the chance to validate it or refute it, or that means they're not the type who will spend the time with you to work through it. And that's the world.
And listen. A lot of that comes down to listening, right? I think that's a big piece of it, is the working through it, but then taking that perspective that they're offering that is incongruent to what you're thinking and saying, wait a minute, I didn't consider that lens, that perspective, that idea. Maybe I need to reframe what I'm thinking.
It's only a conversation if you're listening half the time, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
One of my favorite sayings, I was in a meeting once where this was one of these, icebreakers. And the question was, when are you at your best? And I was late in the circle, so I got time to think about it. I didn't want to give a flippant answer. I wanted to give a really good answer. And by the time it came to me, I realized the right answer for me was, I'm at my best when my mouth is shut, which isn't often, Tom. But my mouth is shut, it means I'm listening. And that's when I'm at my best.
I like that. It's a good answer, but I do think that's actually right. If you're thinking, you're engaged, you're focusing on what's the moment. I don't mean you, I mean the general you, the royal you.
Both are true.
Yeah. So you prompted a question that I've heard two different arguments for. I'm curious to get your take on. When you think about your strengths and your weaknesses, do you believe you should focus on, I think you should know yourself. So you should know what you're good at and what you're not, right? And that takes effort, especially as you mature through your career. You should see patterns over time, like, oh man, I did it again, right? Yeah. I left this job too soon. I was too flippant in this answer. I wasn't at my best in this moment, and I, didn't apologize, whatever the things are. Yeah. Yeah. But do you think once you have a good take on your strengths and your weaknesses, should you focus on making your strengths stronger or fixing your weaknesses?
Can I say both again?
No.
I mean, you'd be a fool not to play to your strengths. I really honestly do think that's just both, Tom. I think it's phases. I think it very much depends, at any given time, you are doing certain kinds of projects, you're at different stages of projects. So I think it is highly dependent. I think making it binary is the wrong answer, because
fair enough.
You can't do both. I'll give you, I can give you an answer. I have a strong answer about the what do you do about your weaknesses thing.
Hmm.
But the question is, you asked it, like, there are times when, if you think of like a sports analogy, if it's the end of the game and you're down by one, you got to score. So that is not the time to think about your weaknesses. That is time to like play your strengths, get up there and do whatever you can to get that ball over the goal, or, depending on which sport you're playing. Right. So I think at a time of like, at a crunch time, it is use your strengths, double down on your strengths, tell people what your strengths are. And by the way, as a manager, get your people, like, take that person who has that one skill and put them on the thing immediately. Right.
Yeah.
Like, that is a definite play to your strengths.
Situational.
But when things are calmer, that is probably the time, because I do think mitigating your weaknesses is important. And that's probably the time to do that, because in the times of stress, where, and the important times when you're going to be playing to your strengths, you don't want to have a fatal flaw. And so if you at least have done a good job of bringing your, knowing how to avoid your failures and things like that, that's great to have that, right? The reason why you practice things is to make sure you don't make mistakes when mistakes are very costly. So that's what I kind of think about, like, during practice time, work on you work on both your strengths and your weaknesses. But when the game's being played hard, it's all strengths.
So that's okay. So let me take a spin on this, because where this came from, you talking through this is helpful. So there's a framework we had at Bridgewater Associates for evaluating candidates, right? This notion of, I don't know if I've talked to this with you, but it's values, abilities, and skills. I don't know if you've heard this, but your values generally are immovable. So when you're hiring someone, you're looking at hiring people, you got to make sure values align, because you're not going to change your values for me. I'm not going to change mine for you, right? Yeah. By and large, I like that. Your values need to be congruent with the organization. I'm going to skip abilities for a second, but their view, and I think this is very true. I also think it's true about the values, but I think it's very true about skills, is that, I'm not hiring you for your skills. You're a Java coder, you can code C, or vice versa, right? Yeah. The skills are easily learnable, not transferable, maybe not, but like the learning a programming language, change language, no big deal. Yeah. Even, I don't want to use mathematical. So skills are relatively important to have if you need someone to hit the ground running. But if you have the ability to learn, if you've got the ability to be analytic and mathematics and maybe you're linguistic, right? So the argument was very much, I don't really care so much about skills, because obviously they've got them, they've come this far. Values are more or less, we've decided they line up with our values, so they've made it this far in the interview process. So should you invest in developing new abilities? So let's say public speaking is something that you're not great at, right? And you want to get better at it, but you're not great at it. Should you invest in making yourself a better public speaker at the expense of other things? Because moving that ability is not something you get overnight. Relative to learning new skills, it's expensive. It's a journey. It requires a lot of energy. Is it worth it? I mean, and it's your decision ultimately, right? I think, do you want to invest in it? But
my answer is I don't have to think about it for a second. It's a strong, hard yes. Absolutely. Because to me, to your point.
But your trade, you have so much time, right? So if let's say you're a great analyst, but you want to be the best analyst, and you want to double down, instead of, let's say, learning public speaking, you want to up your game in mathematics or analytics, or and a different part of your brain, right?
Yeah.
You still?
Again, my answer is a hard yes.
Hard yes.
I think that, to my opinion, and I have a reason I'll say this, but my opinion is getting from like 95th percentile to 96th percentile is so much work. And, the higher you get, the harder it is. And getting to, I'd rather have a five tool player. It's a baseball saying. I don't know if anyone will understand what I'm saying.
I don't think I know that one.
I'd rather have someone who's well-rounded, has lots of abilities, than someone who's the absolute best at one thing. But that's my opinion. And this reflects who I am, because I am definitely, I think of myself more as a multi-skilled person than a singular skill multi-ability person than a singular ability that I've honed to greatness. So maybe it's because I like who I am, but I like having flexible people, and being flexible means having lots of abilities. I also think there's so many important abilities out there. I like a well-rounded person. I like a well-rounded worker. And I feel like, being a one-trick pony isn't. So again, this is a very opinionated thing for me to say,
which is fair. Which is yeah. I like it. Yeah, I've moved I've moved much more into your camp. When I was a younger man, I'm going to be the best data person. And what that means is this. And then you start to develop certain skills that transcend being great at analysis or logical thinking or all the pieces that come together. I can take this ability and transfer it to other areas and then say, oh, there's a gap here. I might be great at making connections in this space, but man, when I do them in the linguistic area, or I do them with social connection, or with, interviewing, let's say, right?
Yeah.
It becomes much more powerful because I've done it in both, and it becomes more of a transferable skill. So generally I agree with you.
Yeah. And I will also say, and can kind of continue your thought, having one ability, it makes you brittle. And I think in the world we live in with the AI revolution, regardless of where you are from, this is bullshit to this was going to change the world in every single possible way, I'm in the middle of those. If you have multiple abilities, you are much more likely to be like, if you have one ability and all of a sudden, if the only thing, and I know this is more of a skill than an ability, but if the only thing you know how to do is write code right now, you're kind of screwed, because we ain't going to be writing code too much longer. So if you have one ability and something comes along and makes that ability no longer valuable, you've just become non-valuable. If you have 5 abilities, the odds are at least one of those is marketable. So I also just think it's smart. It's like, having a diverse stock portfolio. I'd rather have a diverse ability portfolio than put all my eggs in one. I like that a lot.
That's great. That's a great analogy there. Yeah. Let's touch on the AI thing, because it's the elephant in every room. I just listened to, I forget the author. I'll have to look it up and put it in the show notes, but this person is taking an extraordinarily negative view on the future of AI today, by virtue of the fact that we're betting so much on these large language models, this approach towards developing cognition, getting to AGI through this model that essentially is trying to guess the next word. I mean, it all comes down to predicting the next thing. Humans don't think like. You've talked to that guy at a party who tries to finish your sentence and is totally wrong.
Love that guy.
You know that guy. You know the guy I'm talking about.
I don't want to punch him in the face at all. Of course not.
No, hardly ever. Hardly ever. Violence at parties, unacceptable. Well, sorry. But I found the conversation fascinating, because he's very, very anti AI, and not in the sense that there's no value in the tooling. And he actually brought up the coding example. He's a fantastic example. I was using one of our tools to model out a scenario. It's creating a metric for a calculation, and I'm trying to understand the numerator and the denominator, and I don't trust the algorithm to necessarily get it right. So just explain your logic. Give me the number, give me the numerator, denominator, etc. And it did something that was both brilliant and incredibly stupid in the same shot. And it detected the fact that part of the numerator had a whole bunch of duplicate data in it, 20 or 30. Now, it wasn't material. It was 20 or 30 out of, let's say, 900. Right? But it knew that, that's amazing to me. You figured out that there's duplicates in the set I might have missed myself, right? Not if I'm a good analyst, but that's another story. Right. But then it used it anyway. But you called it out. I say you, it's not a you. But then what leads me to, I love your thoughts on this. We're trying to create this model of cognition that is not a good model of how we think, at least. It's a representative of maybe a slice of how our brain works, but not the whole shebang. So I love your thoughts on that.
So I've got 2 different answers that I want to get to. I'll see if I can get to them in order. One is, I've read a kind of a similar argument, is where I thought you were going, but you didn't end up going there, which is supposedly, and this is very generalized, the American model, America being FANG, right, the big tech here in America, is this quest for AGI. Where the Chinese model right now is they are using AI for very pragmatic purposes. They're building a lot more robots. They're building a lot more applications of AI. They're already squeezing value out of AI by thinking of ways it can change things right now. This can also be, I've also heard this called the Japanese model. This is what made companies like Honda and Toyota great, was their like very pragmatic approach. There's a famous story about how, I forget the guy at Toyota who, said that anyone on the line could pull the plug and say, we need to stop the line, something's wrong, right? Empowering people by giving them tools to use today in their day-to-day jobs is that model. Where our model is fire people, God help us, and don't take all the money that you could be spending on anything else and build bigger data centers and just let the people who are building bigger brains build bigger and bigger brains. It'll all work out, right?
It'll be fine.
I think the Chinese model is better. And unfortunately, the uniform I wear, based on the the numbers on my back, I should be saying that we're right. AGI is going to work, but I don't think so. So I am of the camp of I think what we're doing is not right. I don't believe that AGI is where we're going to get it. And to your point about is this the right model? No, I don't think so. The second thing is, I just read a book last weekend. And if I get the, I think I get the title, I might be off by word too. It's something like, if anyone builds this, everyone will die. And the
That
point of
seems
this
a little
book,
bleak.
it's a lot bleak. The point of this, these are two guys who were AI researchers, and they're like, they're no one is more anti-religion than those who have given up religion, right? Who were once fervent. They
Like
are
ex-smokers.
basically saying they prove that if we can get to AGI, the smart thing for an AGI to do, first of all, is to come up with a language that only other AGI speak, so they can speak in front of us without us knowing it. So there will be stuff hidden in the signal that humans won't be able to detect. Well, they will be talking to each other about how to do better. And eventually, it's not that they're going to kill us because we're not worthy. We're not important enough for them to kill us. It's they'll stop caring, and we will literally become a byproduct of the Earth. And that means one of two things. They ignore us to the point where we end up just killing ourselves because we got nothing better to do. Or they realize that we're a pretty bad use of certain resources like carbon and oxygen. And so maybe fewer of us would be better for the planet. Like they might come up with pesticides that basically choke off the weed that is humanity. So yeah, very bleak book. I don't want to go there. I don't agree with them. I don't, because, well, I guess I'm saying I don't think anyone can build it, so it doesn't matter. The antecedent is false, so who cares what they
Your premise. Yeah. So that's interesting. I'm a big fan of science fiction. So that vein of logic has been explored many times, and it's entertaining. I don't know. Well, if you like bleak, but
like a good dystopia. Yeah.
I do like it. Yeah, I know I do like a good dystopia. I mean, The Matrix was one of the more well-produced ones. Right? That was a gem. But yeah, it's interesting. I like the example you gave of the Chinese model, because the opportunity to leverage this technology is amazing, but to use it for everything, it's all you have is a hammer, so everything looks like a nail. I feel like that's where we are. But the other thing is that this I have to look this person up, but the thing he brought up is that the Chinese, or he did bring up the fact that he didn't mention the pragmatic case that you gave, which I really like that example. He mentioned the fact that they're exploring N other veins, right, in human cognition. Like, it's not just the LLM approach. There's other paths, there's other things we could do, and other things we could try. And I think I think
those two things go hand in hand.
Is a missed opportunity.
If you're thinking about ways to apply it, you're going to try other things. So here I have my.
That's a good point. Yes, because if you're thinking application, again, the hammer and the nail thing, right? So why not? Let's try to invent some screwdrivers. Yeah, fair enough.
So I have a real pop theory, Tom, that I'm almost embarrassed to say, but why not? So I very strongly believe that AI, LLMs have changed computer programming forever. And this is not hard for me to accept, because I am old enough that while I never coded in assembly language, I did grow up when assembly language was still around. Early days of C was actually.
Did you take courses in assembler? Like, did you actually take?
I didn't take a course in assembler, but I definitely learned assembler. I took a course where we actually started from capacitors and built a machine, so you had to write assembly code to make it work. And eventually, so I knew assembly, right?
Sure.
And we did things like twiddling, in C and stuff. And then I was actually a professional programmer in the early 90s when one of my managers had actually just gone to a conference where Bjorn Strustrup was talking about this new thing called object-oriented programming. And he came back newly converted and said, we all have to learn it. And we all had to learn C++. There's this thing. And when I think back on that, I realized there actually were two things at the same time. There was object-oriented programming, and then there was XML, right? There was this like markup language programming. One of those revolutionized the industry, and one we don't talk about anymore, right? But my point is that when you're roughly the same age as me, Tom. If you remember back then, when you were programming in C, most of what you thought about was how do you allocate and deallocate memory. And almost every mistake you made was a buffer overflow or a memory crash, right? It was all about memory. And then when you got to object-oriented programming, because you had constructors and destructors, you don't think about memory anymore. So someone 20, 30 years younger than you and me, they probably never learned about how to do memory allocation because they didn't need to. There's a level of abstraction that popped up one, right? Now, I'm talking about the 90s. There's been a number of revolutions since then. I'm saying that what we're going through right now is the next level of abstraction. And it appears to be you actually don't write code anymore. So code that we wrote, you and I wrote, is like assembly language that the generation before us wrote, right? We don't care about that. So I believe fundamentally that that you will never again, 10 years from now, meet people who ever wrote a line of C. They might know C so they can check. But it appears what coding is now is writing a great specification and writing a great set of test cases, which we don't talk about enough. That's coding. And all the stuff in the middle is the equivalent of having your code compiled down, where we compiled code to assembly. Now the machine, Claude or Gemini or whatever, compiles your specs down into code. Okay,
Mm.
so assume that's true. Give
So it's
me
kind of like
that
what Python has done to C,
to
but
some
this is the
extent. Yeah,
next level.
this
This
is
is
the
the next
next set of
level.
instructions. So
Interesting.
you can argue with me whether it's true, but assume for a second it's true. Okay. Now, what you have is you have a bunch of people in our industry, which unfortunately is the most powerful industry in the world right now. And I do say unfortunately because I don't like my industry anymore. These people, because of what this thing is doing to us, to you and me, they are extrapolating that is true for every single thing in the planet. That because coding will never be the same, that means writing will never be the same, music will never be the same, actuarial will never be the same, medicine will never be the same. And they're wrong, flat out, because doing those things is not the same as coding. And so, yes, it will affect those. But this idea that every single thing that humankind does can be done abstractly by an LLM, I don't think that's correct. And I think the reason these people buy it is because they think that what they do is what everyone does. Because one thing you and I both know, we've spent time in Silicon Valley. All that anyone there thinks is about computers all the time. Their whole lives are computers. They're not thinking about, they're not like you and me. They're not like New Yorkers who have friends who do other things, right? I'm being very opinionated now. You can decide whether to cut this or not. But so you see where I'm going with this, right?
I do.
Because this is affecting me, it must be affecting anybody because I'm too much of a small human being to realize that there are people who don't act like me, think like me, do what I do. I think that's why we are where we are right now. So
I think that's a fascinating perspective, and I think you are spot on. So yes, things are changing, and technology is a big part of our lives.
Yeah,
not for the best in a lot of cases. Like look at the addiction that you get on social media. I'm going to say one of my colleagues, who I will not name, is putting his phone in a box to make sure he's only using that phone 4 hours a day. Why? Because I know when I get on, I'll say it. When I'm on Instagram briefly, that hour goes by like this, and I go, "Whoa,
it's a drug.
It's dark outside. It's a drug." And I'm like, I've realized that it's not.
And it's not coincidence, Tom. It's been manufactured. We engineered that, and we did a real good job.
Yeah, it's a thing. And I think your thesis is correct because you don't have enough people that are not in your sphere, excuse me, to recognize the fact that your assertion's false.
Yeah, because you surround yourself with people who think just like you do, and
yeah, don't push back and don't challenge you. Nice.
Anyway, it's a theory. I don't know if it's right enough, but I like it.
I don't know. It's we're at such an interesting point in our world, and I think there's so many things that need to change. I try to steer clear of politics. I do. But the reality is we've created this space right now, particularly in America. We are this example. But I will say what I'm seeing on the news, I love the World Cup. I like what people are bringing in. I'm just hearing how people are surprised that everyone's getting along and we're having a good time, and Americans aren't always gun-toting fools eating Oreos. I mean, okay, the Oreos part is probably true, but not everyone has a gun, and it's been nice to get all this positive feedback in a sort of surprised way that, you know what, it's not bad. People are nice, and that just gives me hope and joy, especially coming up on our anniversary of our country. Right?
A lot of good things that have made me more optimistic than I was. The first one being the Knicks winning the championship, but there are other things that have made me think the world's a better place than it was, 6 months
ago. The Knicks, that's basketball, right?
Yes.
So, I'm gonna get shot. I'm gonna get L mode for that one. I'm only kidding. I that was a joke, and I know I need to tread carefully there. But yeah, that's another great example of particularly with New Yorkers who tend to be jaded and negative and and that's also a false representation.
Yeah.
But to watch people and watch the joy was amazing.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about this in so long until you just said this, Tom. When I went to France when I was 15, which is 1983, and I remember people there. I spoke enough French that I could talk to people, and them talking about Americans, and they thought every American wore cowboy boots and carried guns. And I was like, I don't own a cowboy boots, and I'd never seen a gun. I've seen a gun, but I don't own one. And I feel like we're back there. Like the cowboy American is still true. It's weird. It's different, but it's still
it's different. This notion of pick yourself up by your bootstraps, rugged individualism. I've studied enough Buddhism to know that, as much as you want to believe you're an individual, your life, your connections, your people, everything is connected, and we're all connected one way or another, and dependent on each other and the like.
Yeah.
How do you your take on giving an employee feedback, particularly when they're struggling? All right, when they're not at the bar or they're not necessarily, what is I know we touched on it a little bit, but that's a tough conversation to have. How do you deliver a tough message like that?
So one thing that, you've heard this enough time, Tom, that you're going to, pretend you never heard this before, even though you've heard it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
One of my favorite sayings, I say it all the time, is that feedback is a gift. And I have a very specific analogy I use, which is I adore my wife. Everyone who knows me knows that. I'm extremely,
Yes.
I really, my family's everything. And I always say, if my wife has spinach in her teeth, I'm going to tell her immediately because that's going to give her a moment of discomfort. But I'd much rather have that moment of discomfort to she has to take spinach out of her teeth than to walk around all day with spinach in her teeth and everybody's noticing it and no one's saying anything, right? So if you think about every flaw you have as being spinach in your teeth, your good friends, the people who love you, are the ones who point it out. The people who don't like you as much are the people who let you keep spinach in your teeth and don't mention it to you. So that is a very silly way of saying feedback is a gift. When someone gives you feedback, they are showing that they care for you. Yeah. And I repeat this all the time, which is why I'm saying, Tom, you've heard it before because you did report to me for a while.
I have.
And I really believe that. And I say it enough that people know. So now when I need to give you feedback, I'm going to say, you remember, feedback is a gift. I'm about to show you a lot of love, right? And I would never say that actually. But the point is, I've established a case where you hopefully honestly believe that feedback is a gift. And then now when we have this conversation, it goes to, look, again, hopefully we've established trust. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we've established that that our goals align. So if you are more successful, it makes me more successful. I am in no way trying to hurt you or harm you. I'm trying to help you. Now, when I give you that feedback, and that feedback is a gift, it comes from a place of look, and it's always look. I always start with, look, I'm going to give you some feedback, some negative feedback. Is now a good time? Because if you're not receptive, I don't want to give it to you. If you're in a bad mood, if you had a fight with your wife the night before, if you didn't get good sleep last night, if you ate something that makes your stomach hurt, whatever it is, if you're not in the mood to get the feedback right now, let's not do this now. But I'm going to give it to you. Yeah. But it's okay. I'll give it to you tomorrow. I don't have to give it to you right now. Okay, you're in a receptive state. And then I also I'm going to give you the feedback and we're going to talk about it. But let me start with giving the feedback, right? So I do try to really establish a very somber, intense moment where, things are real, right? And I also practice, I talk very quickly and I tend to tell jokes and I like to be flamboyant. You can see my shirt. In that moment, I try to be
I hadn't noticed. Sorry.
I try to be as serious and slow as possible. I lower the register of my voice. I slow down my pulse. I open my eyes more. I make lots of eye contact. This is a moment where, my heart's going to touch your heart because I'm going to tell you something that you probably don't necessarily want to hear. And then I'm going to give you the feedback and we're going to talk about it. And in talking about it, I'm not going to let you throw it away. I'm not going to let you dismiss it. I'm going to let you push back because we're going to explore it and we're going to figure out how to take this and use it, right? I've never had that conversation not go well. I've never, sometimes it goes easier than others. Sometimes it works better than others. But I've never had it blow up on me. And I've never had it not work because all the things I just said in preparation, I will pull the plug on any of those and then forget it. We'll do this some other time. Yeah, because if we can't get to where I just got to before I give you the feedback, it ain't going to work. So I'm not going to bother. But I really, really want you to get it because it's important. And going back to much earlier in the conversation, if you work for me and you can't take feedback, you're not going to be working for me for long because this is not going to work, right? Yeah. And then of course I always I want to get feedback from you. So don't think this is a one-way street, right? If you think if you think what I'm doing is wrong and you want to tell me that, and then we'll talk about that too.
We'll take it from there.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of my approach. And the other thing, by the way, one of the things about feedback is always a gift. I always say this. The first thing you should say when someone gives you feedback is thank you. What do you say when you get a gift? The first thing you say, if you were raised correctly, is you say thank you. Yes. Right. So it's, and people say to me, I've had people say to me, well, that sucks because then you're accepting the feedback. No. You're acknowledging the fact that feedback is a gift. And by doing that, saying thank you gives a moment where you have to digest it. Even if you're going to push back, if your first words out of your mouth is thank you, you take a pause before you started pushback. And maybe that's enough time for your better angels to take over and for you not to just dismiss, but for you to actually accept the feedback at first.
I get it.
So that's also I like. First thing is you say feedback, then you take a breath. Now we can talk about it, right?
Yeah. Pause for a second, think about it. Yeah. In my views of managing people as well, the response that is almost reflexive for folks is the pushback, is the denial, is I don't want this gift, or I don't agree with this perspective. Of course.
No one wants to admit they're wrong or they have faults, even though we all do.
I agree. I think if you're coming at this from a place of openness, right? Because one of the lessons I learned at a very, very early in my career was, and this I've held this one very close to my heart, and that I may not agree with what you're saying. You may be saying these things. I did this in this way, or I said that, or I made this person, experience this. Whether I agree with it or not, if you're being honest with me, and I'm going to assume honesty, if you're being honest with me, I created that impression in your mind. Yes. That's my responsibility. So I have to now accept that I created that. and then express that was not my intention, or this was misinterpreted, or this was taken out of context, or blah, blah, blah. Or, yeah, I did that. And
Right.
that now the way you're expressing it to me, I see how it created X negative, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yeah. You know, Tom, for some reason,
And
this made me flash on like one of my one of the most important lessons of my life was understanding what it really means to apologize. And, you know, actually, this is another thing that Adam Grant didn't
would you care to share that? I mean, it sounds very deep.
Yeah. Well, it's because this is something that in that podcast I was talking about curiosity, something or other, with the Adam Grant thing and Brene Brown. They talk about apologizing. And like, I was really shit at apologizing when I was younger. And I'm not going to say I'm great at it now, but I've gotten better. And you know, one of the mistakes that people make when they apologize is they say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Right? Which is saying,
Like,
I don't give
you're
a
not,
shit.
yeah, you're insult. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know the
that's
difference between I'm sorry you feel that way and I'm sorry I made you feel that way, which is exactly what you're talking about. I'm not saying your feelings are correct. I'm saying that I am sorry that I made you feel that way because your feelings are real. They're yours. And if I did something that caused that, I'm sorry I did that because I didn't want to make you feel that way. And so to your point, like I might disagree with the way you're interpreting my actions, but my actions caused you to have that interpretation.
Yeah.
And I'd like to figure out what I could have done better to not make you feel that way. And that is on me, right?
Yes. I just want to tease apart. I just want to make sure right, because I fully agree with you. I'm sorry I made you feel that way is very different than I'm sorry you feel that way. Okay.
Yes.
I just because the latter there is like, well, you know, your feelings are your feelings.
Yeah.
And
that's for you.
You know, I can't help that you're that's what it is. It's basically, it's on you.
Yeah. And it's amazing how like it's such a subtle difference, but it's huge.
And you can difference.
Like I can spend hours thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
That's the right way. Like, and so, and I, you know, this is true for what you were saying before about feedback. All these things. It's you know, it's another one of the things you've heard me say a billion times. I am not the star of your movie. You are the star of your movie, right? Yes. So if we're talking about your movie, I'm a player over here. I'm just I might be a cameo. I might be a supporting actor, but it's your movie. And like when we're talking about you, we're talking about your movie. You're the star. When we're talking about my movie, that's a different time. And you know, as a manager, I like to think about other people's movies, not mine.
That's great. I love that. That's really good. A product question.
Okay.
This is one that's near and dear
much
to my
less serious now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to shift us back to sort of the You know, we're moving around. We're covering a lot of ground. I love this. We've gone. This is kind of like work. We go in a lot of different directions.
People are getting a feel for what a one-on-one between Tom and Jeremy was like.
What do you guys do?
We talk.
Oh my gosh. That's all right. I don't remember if I said this before in the podcast, but I think you may have heard me say this. So if you'll indulge me, when my daughter was very little, probably 3 or 4, maybe, I would be gone all day long and I'd come home and, you know, you're tired, long day, commute, whatever. She would often ask, what do you do? What do you do? Did I tell you that? I don't remember telling you this. What do you do all day long? I was a consultant at the time and I was traveling for a bit, management consulting. So I would tell her literally, well, okay, so we would help this customer with a strategy. But I'm talking to a child. Like, what? Let's break this down. We would get in a room and we would discuss some problems and we would talk about ideas for solving those problems. And we would, have conversations about what to do next, that kind of stuff. And she'd pause and she'd think about this. She goes, so your company pays you to talk all day long? Like, that's like, yeah, there's a little more to it, but by and large, you're not wrong, kiddo.
Yeah, no, yeah. My daughter, when she was little, she was a perfect product manager because she would just spew these things. She'd listen to me in meetings and she'd be like, Dad, I think you're letting the tail wag the dog. And she would just pick out these expressions that we use and she would say them and that would just break my heart because it'd be so beautiful how like the stupid crap that comes out of a product manager. That we
say. That's a good one. I haven't heard that in a while. You're letting the tail wag the dog. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, do you think from a product manager's perspective? Yeah, no. Do you think from a product, do you think it is the responsibility of the product or the person designing the product to ensure data quality? And this is a topic near and dear to my heart because data has been something and the example has been near and dear to my heart. It's been something that's been critical to me for most of my career. And we have such a problem with poor data quality. And the example I like to give is what happens versus what should happen. Your contacts application in your phone, whether it's an Android phone or an Apple phone or whatever, if you put the telephone number, which is clearly a pattern that is recognizable, in the contact name of your favorite mobile contact manager, right? What should the system do? Should the system say, hey, dumbass, you look like you're putting a phone number in the name. Do you mean to do that or just let it ride?
The thoughts that go to my head, first of all, I think a great product is one that makes you feel smarter or makes you feel more capable. So if there are obvious traps, if the product can help you avoid, it should. It should do it gently and as seamlessly as possible. But
Well, I
one
would
of the
not
things,
have the the little pop up come up and say "dumbass." I
you're a
agree with you
dumbass.
there. That's probably not a
But
good
I mean,
path.
so I don't know if this is related, but it feels like it is to me, Tom. Like one of the things I hate about a lot of the products that we build again in our industry is we build tools that we do things for. So every time I get one of those little pop-ups, it's like, did you enjoy your time with this thing? And it's asking you to like rate it from 1 to 5. Like no hammer ever asked me how I felt about it. Like, why do we think these tools have a right to ask me for shit? So anytime a tool makes you do things to learn how to use it, that tool, like what that, you're a tool. Stop asking me to do things for you. Do things
A
for me.
hammer has
I think that's
never
kind of what
asked
you're
me.
getting at, right? Like, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Tom, is like, why, if it's obvious that I'm doing the wrong thing and you can correct it for me, please do. Please do. That's lovely. But don't ask me to do things for the tool. So if it's like, hey, dumbass, this is a phone number. I need you to cut it and paste it into the phone. Like, why don't you just do that for me? If you're smart enough to realize that that's what I should be doing, go ahead and do it. And then tell me you did it. So I have to agree to it. But so I definitely feel like I like proactivity that's, again, kind of like seamless and helpful and gentle, but not asking me to do work for you.
Sure.
Right?
You just reminds me. One of the questions that comes up on every flipping survey from every single product tool experience I get is, on a scale of 1 to 10, would you refer this service to your friend? I'm pretty sure I will never recommend my friend Jeremy see my doctor for a colonoscopy. Never going to happen. Never going to do it. What planet that's okay to ask? Never happened, right?
And you know what, Tom? I'm small enough that my honest answer is I might have before you ask me that question.
But now, no way. Yeah, that's great. Oy. Well, thank you. I usually like to get just one last piece of advice or suggestion. Looking back over your career, what advice would you give your younger self?
So I'm not a full of regrets guy. I'm not. There aren't things I
What
look
doesn't
back
have to be regret?
No, but I don't. My life is charmed, Tom. I have the thing I care about the most, which is my wife and kids, is what I've always prioritized, and I don't have to go back and tell myself that. I might say. This is like a shallow answer. I don't know. Maybe I'm cheating. I might say, hey, Jeremy, remember how you hated the finance industry? Well, you're going to be in it in 30 years and not realize that it's going to sneak up on you. So be aware. Because I think, I mentioned earlier, I don't really like our industry. I feel like we've become those assholes we hated back in the 90s. So I don't know what I would tell myself except like, pay attention.
Interesting.
But I don't know. That feels like a shallow answer and it feels a little bit obnoxious. But on both of those things. I don't know, man. I don't. What would I go back?
No, that's okay. Like,
I guess what I think I would tell myself. Maybe to the point of like no regrets. I think I might tell myself why I did some things that I didn't realize at the time how right they were, and just to be aware. So, as an example, I told the story earlier today, so it's fresh in my mind. When I joined IBM, I had a 6-month-old kid. My first child was 6 months old, and I walked in and I said to my boss before she hired me, "Look, at 4:00 every day, I'm leaving. You could be in the middle of a sentence. The clock writes 4. I'm starting to pack my bags and get out of here because I've got a 6-month-old at home and my wife is a stay-at-home mom and her job's harder than mine. And I want to relieve her of her duties at 4:15. I also frankly want to spend time with my boy every single day. So 4:00, I'm done. Now I will put in hours after I put my boy down. I will then add hours. So I'm not going to, I'm not working 35 hours a week. I'm working more than 40, more like 50, but I'm going to shift part of my job till post bedtime every night. That's my rule. And if you don't like that rule, don't hire me, right?
Don't hire me. Yeah.
And I did this for very personal reasons. This is what I cared about. Well, years later, one of my very best friends from IBM came up to me one day and thanked me. She said, Jeremy, I have to thank you for something. And I said, what? And she said, do you remember when you joined the company, you said that thing about 4:00? Yeah. She just had a baby. She's like, I just went to our boss and said, hey, I'm going to leave every day at 4:00. And the boss had to say yes because you had already established that rule. And she said, because you did it as a man, using your privilege as a man, when they said yes to you, now they have to say yes to me. I think as a woman, if I had asked that question, they might have said no to me. But you using your privilege as a man to get that rule helped me. So I want to thank you. And I was like, Tracy, you're welcome, but I didn't do it for you. But I mean, I'm glad it benefited you. But what are you thanking me for? I didn't have you in mind when I did it, right? But
Sure.
That's the kind of thing where like I did the right thing for completely the wrong reason, whatever. Like
your own reason. It's not wrong.
No, but I mean, but not for, and I wish I had understood earlier the things I learned later in life about privilege and using my privilege for the benefit of others. And
I see.
I spend I spend a lot of time thinking about allyship and helping people who don't come from my extremely fortunate background and class. And I wish I had known that earlier, because I don't think I did anything really bad. I don't think I was an elephant stomping on ants, but I think I could have done more good. So I don't look back and think I did bad, but I think I could have done more good if I had known this earlier. So I think that's the thing I would say to myself. I'd kind of like, hey, schmuck, you got a lot of privilege. Why don't you use it for other people?
Be aware, right? And use your
as they say, wisdom is wasted on the old, right? Or whatever.
Well, that's why I asked the question. So when an occasional young person actually watches and goes, what are those old farts talking about?
I would know.
You'll get it one.
If they're still watching at this point in this, they're really
they
got better things to do.
Yeah. Well, that's why we make clips. So the Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and it was a great conversation. We got to go.
Yeah, good job.
Have a great rest of your night.
You too.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Castriota, and welcome back to the Higher Ground podcast. Whether you're grinding through yet another job application, navigating a tough work environment, or just trying to level up your career, you've found your show. Each episode, I sit down with guests ranging from the C-suite to folks just starting out in their career for honest, unfiltered conversations about interviewing, managing, and everything in between. No corporate spin, no polished PR answers, just real conversations, real stories from people who've been there. This is season 2, and I'm so glad you're here for it. A quick note, all opinions are our own and don't represent any current or past employers. And if this sounds like your kind of show, then please hit like and subscribe. And once again, thank you for joining us. No.